So welcome everyone to this panel conversation, which is part of our 4th Days of Commoning event, I think, which is in collaboration with our We Are Commoners tour venue, which is the Hub in Sleaford in Lincolnshire. I'm Emma Dacre and I'm Exhibitions and Project Development Officer at Craftspace, and I'm co-curator of the We Are Commoners exhibition. And joining me are 3 of our exhibitors from the exhibition and someone who also inspired another of the exhibitors. So welcome to Ishik, Eva of Forthland, Lise, who worked with Gelewesh Walakani, and Ali from Bees and Refugees, which his Bees and Refugees inspired Jackie Oliver's work in the exhibition. So for anyone watching this who hasn't been able to see the exhibition yet, We Are Commoners invites you to become or recognise yourself as a commoner. In the exhibition, the skills and the materials that we show that the artists' projects provide, utilised in the projects, provide ideas and inspiration to common, we hope, and also give insight into examples of commoning. And for what we mean by commoning, we mean ideas we share, resources we share, and pooling of experience and knowledge to make everybody's lives better. So through the development of the exhibition and Craftspace work with our Crafting the Common network, we felt that activating the verb to common is a way that we can renew public life, and acts of commoning can be woven into every aspect of life to become a way of living. A life where we can connect to produce shared rituals and resources that we look after together. Getting involved through cooperation, mutual care, and exchange can heal and make change in our communities, which seems very valid at the moment and needed. So this brings me to our conversation subject today, the title of which is Crafting Community Commons, Social Cooperation to Get Things Done. So through this conversation, we're planning to explore and give examples of how commoning through creative and social cooperation generates exchanges which we think can produce new ideas, systems and shared resources, which are all strong themes of the exhibition. So I thought maybe to start us off, you could all introduce yourselves a little more and tell us about your practice and your connection to the exhibition. So Lise, if we could start with you.
Okay, thank you, and thank you for having me here. My name is Lise, and I am living in Oslo, Norway, visual artist here, and I'm participating in the exhibition with a work that I've done together with Gelewesh Walakani, which is Norwegian Kurdish, and we have titled it "A Room Between the Rooms," where we for a year has worked with undocumented immigrants living in hiding in Oslo, Trondheim, and Bergen, 3 cities in Norway. And actually, it was the pandemic that made us enable us to work with groups in different cities, because we had to move from having the idea of working together in our studio to do part of it online. And collaboration is an important part of my practice, and also social engagement, using art as a way to raise awareness, to bring people together, to start conversations, and using our hands doing that is, and I found, is a very important opening tool. Maybe I can start with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Lise. Then Eva, Ishik.
Yes, hello. We are, Eva and Ishik, and we have a socially engaged art practice called Forthland. Yes, here we are. And we are participating in the Commoners exhibition, showing our piece, New Land, which you see here in the background of this image. And this was a piece we made back in 2015, sitting on a street over a period of a few months, passing trays of straw between us, and little by little rolling little bundles of them in the sort of public space. And as we were doing this, people were joining us. And from that process, everyone in a way embedded their story into these bundles that then become the new land. And we met people from all corners of the world, really. And there was this commonness in the shared making of this piece, and that embedding of the stories, that everyone seemed to believe that they knew what we were doing, but at the same time, it was equally mysterious. Yeah, and we've been working in socially engaged practice for over a decade, working with communities often on the periphery, sort of bringing in peripheral knowledge to the center, to weave new and surprising myths about land and people. And in the same way that Lisa spoke about the hand, we have a saying in our practice that we often refer back to, which is handheld knowledge. And when we kind of meet each other with that knowledge that we can access through our hands, we are already arriving at a different type of start point in terms of commoning and a shared space of humanity, really.
Great, thank you. Ali. Say you're on mute, Ali.
Hi. I was saying that you were both brilliant, and I'm very thankful for being amongst both of the artists. You're my favorite people. I'm Ali. I come from Damascus, from Syria. I founded a project called Bees and Refugees 2 years ago, right before COVID, in the purpose of using beekeeping as therapy with anyone who's struggling with like PTSD or severe anxiety. I don't know if any of you had a beekeeping workshop before, but like being around bees, believe it or not, being around bees is very therapeutic, and it's a calming experience. The way we work in Bees and Refugees, everything we've achieved is the collective work of so many people. So we have a network of volunteers, and I think in the last 2 years we had more than 200 people work on this project. And so it's not only myself, it's me and almost 200 buzzing bees. We try to learn a lot from how bees work together and how they support each other, how they function as one and for the benefit of the whole colony. And that's how we try to run Bees and Refugees. Yeah, that's all from me.
That's a lovely analogy as well, Ali, that I hadn't thought of before, learning from the bees for that, the benefit of everyone all working together and drawing that into your practice. That's really interesting. I hadn't thought of it that way. But so your model of Bees and Refugees is more of an enterprise model. You're a community interest company, so which differs a bit from the artist's work. In the creative examples we've got, but can you tell us a little bit more? You've touched on it in your intro there, but about the collaborative nature of Bees and Refugees, how that works in terms of perhaps pooling resources with the people that you work with, or sharing knowledge, and what impact that's had for the people that you work with, what's changed for them.
Okay, on a personal level, first of all, when I started this project, I had no connections in the city. I had no access to green spaces to place my beehives at. So when I started this project, I had to reach out to many community members, and I think thanks to this project, I was able to build many connections and establish new connections in this city. Not only for me. So the idea of Bees and Refugees is that we have volunteers and myself running the organization. We support refugees and local community members with workshops and with especially beekeeping. But the main thing that happens here is the fact that we create this safe space for both communities, whether they're asylum seekers or refugees or local community members, to meet in this space and work together and learn something very fascinating. So they learned all about bees and beekeeping, and then there are all the kind of workshops that and skills that they acquire as well in the space. So the project allowed us to create a network, new networks in London, between local community members and refugees and asylum seekers. And I hope that I answered your question. I tend to forget what was the question, and then
No, you did. I imagine as well that I think like Ishik and Eva was saying that that you have the handheld knowledge, so people are bringing in skills. So I'm sure the people you work with also bring knowledge and skills you learn from them, as well as them learning things from you from the workshops that you do. And the community groups that you work with, where you base the hives.
Absolutely. I mean, especially with beekeeping, because beekeeping is an ancient craft, and we work with very different communities from across the world. And then many of those we work with actually had beekeeping experience that they brought with from their home. And then when we do comparative beekeeping, when we compare the methods between different schools, it's really interesting. We all learn from each other. And I think one of the most interesting facts we learned from that natural beekeepers everywhere, they look after the bees in an ethical way, almost in a very similar way, and they treat the bees ethically in a very similar way. Commercial beekeepers everywhere, they also had very similar practices.
That's great. So Lise and Eva, Ishik, how does collaboration work in your practice? Kind of what impact does it have in the way that you work? We'll start with Lise, but you're on mute.
Oh, I didn't know which one to answer first. And yeah, I think, you know, the collaboration is really the key. I mean, this is the whole essence of it. And for me, it's also, I'd like to say it's also important, the collaboration that I have with Gelavesh, because then we are two. She's also born in Kurdistan and so Kurdish, and that way we also had coming to Norway when she was 13, and I think that helped us with language, because there was part of the group that didn't speak neither English or Norwegian, and that was really helpful. But I think also the most is that in collaboration we all learn. It's like you start off with like a set of, like, we used drawing and different ways of expressing ourselves as a way to share stories, but we used the seasons, we were outside, so we had different ways of assignments or starting point, but then we all drew and we all talked and we all shared, and that way, that creates that sort of a common space, or space where we both are listening and are able to tell. So I think that's and that through that we all learn. I mean, I learned so much through these workshops that yeah, I guess then I can comment more later, maybe.
Is there anything, Eva, Ishik, you'd like to add about your practice and how you work in a collaborative way?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it echoes what you both said, really. This place of learning, this place of shared knowledge, a lot about uncertainty. So a lot about collaboration is about mutual unknowing. And in that mutual unknowing, there's a tenderness and a vulnerability. And if we can all be in that vulnerability of unknowing, then our hearts will always open to new ways that kind of want to come through or emerge. So we work a lot with that. And also the idea that, of course, as like beekeeping is like really ancient, like people in a village structure were always collaborating. And now we have like village structures made up of beings from all over the world, which is quite incredible in terms of the potential of what can come through about an archetype of human knowing, and how the cultural edges have kind of made that turn into different shapes, and then where we stand as that common source, it becomes a really beautiful exercise of that. And we often, I mean, we've been working with this idea of fourth land being this imaginary land that is like occupied by everybody simultaneously and collectively in the projects. So each person who stands is almost like a standing stone in a circle, and we need every single one of those stones to bring through the energy that becomes the material that we work with. So that in some ways comes from the collective subconscious of everyone who is there, and is always unknown, because with every group it is different. With every group a different something to be in service to will come through that is always beautifully surprising. So I guess we think about collaboration as that, as really a healing through a process, opening to surprise, uncertainty, and yeah, never knowing, and yeah, learning and listening, as you both said.
I think there's so much to kind of think about there in what you said. And you said yesterday when we met to talk about this as well, Ishik, something really lovely about being open to other cultures as gift bearers, and obviously the synergy with all of your work, working with people from other cultures, migrants and refugees. And I think there's something about with collaboration and commoning as well, and perhaps more kind of traditional ideas about commoning, that there has to be kind of that openness to what might happen. I think with all of your projects, you've got to be quite open. You can't be quite structured from the start. Maybe yours is a bit more structured, Ali, but I imagine you still have to be quite open. You can't put on restrictions of what's going to happen. So the balance is really important, and being open to everybody's contribution. Is that difficult to manage as well? We've talked a lot in the development of this project about the tragedy of the commons, in that it's for everybody and everyone to manage, but then it has to work as well. So sometimes rules are needed. So I wonder if that's something you've kind of had to manage as well within your project, to get that balance for everyone to be able to speak and generate ideas.
I think
there's a lot of threads.
Yeah.
I think it's more about before kind of creating a particular type of container or wall, a place of a particular format. It's important, as Ishik said before, that to kind of be immersed together as that group, whoever have come together, in the sort of essence of what is uncertainty. And we often refer to this stage of the work as a storm. In fact, we did a whole piece which we call The Storm, which was essentially an immersion, a complete immersion in the space of uncertainty, with various things and roles we were all doing. But it became this collective improvisation that began with everyone, including ourselves, feeling a bit like, what's going to happen? And it's that space of excitement and anxiety at the same time, but also it's like a gateway to the surprising creative force that can come through the collective. And this is what we see over and over again. So without that immersion in uncertainty as a tool of strength, that closure can come up a bit quick, and it's often governed by fear or wanting to avoid at all stake uncertainty or chaos. So we feel that the uncertainty and the chaos is essential stage in order to create that container. And we need to allow the container to be revealed to us, not us coming with the container in a way. So that is also surprising. And then the container shifts and it's malleable rather than something that is permanent in that sense. So,
and the idea of rules is really interesting in relation to this. So if we're thinking about the space as this vessel, and rules are cultural experiences expressed in language that most people, if you're working with cross-cultural groups, will understand in a multitude of different ways. And in any of our projects, we've never really had roles. We've had stories, essentially, because the story then from the beginning allows everybody to their own understanding of that story to be valid, and through a process of inhabiting a story, everybody can have their own place in it, of resonance and dissonance, and it all comes together as this structure. So then you're never doing anything wrong. A big part of the work has always been like what we're dealing with collectively, and you know, the commons is an example of that, is we've been told for a long time that we're doing things wrong, that we mustn't go there, that we mustn't harvest here, that this is private property, that this thing is, you know, out of place. So if we're actually working to create something that is different from that and offers like a hopefulness, then the first thing we need to kind of listen to is that we're not doing anything wrong, and all of us stand as sacred in like individual vibrations of this kind of circle of life. So even when we've had like gardens on an estate where we've kind of occupied that territory with people from all over the world, there actually hasn't been rules in a certain way. And there's been a lot of processes around the beauty of conflict, because essentially conflict creates a community if we all have the trust that we can move through it, and it creates a real opening. And again, comes back to this idea of listening. But the gift bearers that you mentioned at the beginning, actually, because every project is a new teacher. So that word actually came from working with a group of Syrian families in Cornwall, who we've been working with actually for maybe the last 4 years. And in Arabic, there is a phrase, Ayunak Kariva.
Ayunak al-Hilva,
which
do you know
probably
Ali?
we're not saying correctly, but it means I carry you in my eyes. And there was something so beautiful that when we met the families, they would say this, and they informed us that it was something that they would say in the market. If they were in their village, they would say it to another person. And we were like, wow, this is like really incredible honoring of presence and learning when we each meet a stranger and we each meet somebody else. So, and then we realized that, you know, that is the same as the gifts. And when we receive someone with our fullness, we will always meet the gifts of that person, which will teach us things and open our hearts. So that's where that's where the word came from. So a lot of the words that we use are collective words in themselves, because they've come through a process. They're not something that we've sat at home and come up with from our minds.
Yeah, I love
Beautiful.
that. I love that phrase.
Yeah.
Every project is a new teacher. I feel that in craft-based practice as well. Ali, were you going to? It looked like when I felt like you were going to.
When you were saying that because of the nature of my project, it's probably that it has a bit more structure to it rather than it, or let's say it's less creative than you were. But I have to say, it's the way we work is also very chaotic. And we love that there is some sort of chaos in the operation. So we kind of allow everyone to always do whatever they think they have to do, or like so we give them the space and the freedom to own whatever they task they're doing, and like to also be the decision makers always. So we run this organization in a way where it's like there is no hierarchy. I don't know how to pronounce this word, hierarchy. I don't
Perfect.
know. Yeah, and I kind of by the time we reached my turn, I kind of forgot what was the point I wanted to make. But like this is, I mean, more or less this that we embrace the chaos within the structure of our work, because we all feel that it actually increase our creativity, and it kind of always brings out much better results. Especially that we have, as I said, we had more or less 200 volunteers work on this project, and they were always working whenever they could do the work. So people were always completing each other's tasks, and working together sometimes on a similar task, or like perhaps a task that could take 6 months and then 50 people has worked on it. And it was always like the results were always brilliant, and it was all thanks to the collective genius of all these people working together and finishing each other's work.
Fantastic. So, Lise.
Yeah, I was also thinking about it's very interesting what you both are saying and describing, and I think for us about we also collaborated with Humans in Organization, Humans in Limbo. It's translated, which have been following the immigrants over a very long time, because there's something about trust too. I think we also felt like when you open this space, when you open to share, you share stories. The vulnerability can also be, you have to handle like that there will be a safe space to be open, because sometimes when you draw or you write, you come into something, and then so we all shared it with each other, but you could also choose not to. Like there were always, so I recognize very well that we had some sort of a format, but it was always open within it. But for us, we were also very concerned about that safety, and that they felt cared for, so that if something came up maybe afterwards, after having made a drawing or something, there would be someone that also was seeing them again or more often, so that we felt that was also a good or needed, because it's vulnerable, very difficult situation for many, and yeah, so that was part of I think was very important for us. And also that we met a small group, but over a year, so we really also we met once a week in the beginning, so we really built up this sort of feeling of confidence and sharing and listening, and yeah.
So I was just thinking that you've all touched on, and I think we're very conscious of at Craft Space is creating this space, this environment, whether it's in person or online. Obviously, we've had to do that more recently, and Lise, with your project, a lot of it was online initially. But I wonder, just thinking back when we talked, I mentioned rules and the commons. I wonder if kind of the rules to this kind of work is create that openness and creating that space where people do feel able to contribute, rather than having more rules in the kind of traditional idea of them. It's having that openness is kind of a rule, and creating that safe space. I was going to ask about that as well, about space as well, and how a little, if you could maybe talk a little bit about how space or locality works in your projects, and that idea of how you create that for people to take part. Maybe we'll come to Forthlum first, as you can ever.
There's a lot of things, isn't it?
The first thing that was coming to me was the idea of this word that came through actually called trust carrying, which is similar to what Lise has just been sharing, that everybody who's working on the project is holding that place of trust, which often means that you're just in service completely to the people who are coming. So absolutely, there's that space always to share. And there's a space to be with whatever emerges from the process in just complete service, and that in itself creates the space. So in a way, that's something that is known wherever the locality is, that if people are coming into a process with us, that idea of that is present always. And in different localities, we will have to do different things in order to create that. What we often do is use objects or create an installation that embeds a space, a locality with elements of curiosity and elements of loose parts, if we were calling them that. So that when people arrive, there's something known and unknown. There's something that can be immediately handled. They're also met with the human, with the humanness. And we were talking about this yesterday. Most importantly, the space has been imbued through all the care that we've done before people arrive, so that when they arrive, it's felt as a sense. So the process beforehand is about how do we go through all the layers of thinking and being with whatever may emerge, so that when people come, that's the welcome that they can feel. It's not spoken about, it's just something that is present. And that often means that there is love placed in all the things that are around, whether we've made them personally or whether we've allowed people a collective making process that has embedded them into the space as well.
And I also think that we often speak about sort of nature as our collective home, because whether you are on making a sort of growing project with a community in London, or whether we are in a more rural location in Cornwall with the cliffs and the sea and the forest, essentially when we meet in nature, we are held by nature, no matter where we're from. So what we also always do in our collaboration is to deeply embed ourselves within the space before we host anything. And we often go to the place in various ways with our sort of internal processes in order to listen to what the land wants to speak first. And then from there, the stories come, or maybe there's, I don't know, we found the forest of the sea, which we call these kelpies. I don't know if you know the kelp, but they're this incredible seaweed that had all come up on this beach, and they wanted to sort of come with us to a process. So it's again allowing that, what is it that the nature is offering to this? What are we seeing, opening our senses to before any process collectively have started in a way? So by doing that, you are creating a deeper invitation to the place you're in, again, without putting a sort of fixed parameter of what that place is. So people have that spaciousness with coming into the project in a way. And, you know, when we, this is why there's so many threads. When we first did our projects with the Syrian families of Cornwall, they did the dabke, which is the traditional dance in Syria. And they did it on this piece of land where we were working. And it was the first time they had danced since arriving to the UK. And witnessing them in their dance, echoing these ancient rhythm and steps into the core of the earth, was just incredible. And everyone who was there, including the locals, in a way, the real locals, if you want to call it that, there was this distortion in a way of who had actually been there for the longest, because the knowing of their steps was this incredible connection. So it's also about this recognition of this oscillation of connection to this place in a deeper sense. And that's just been wonderful. And this is again a reoccurring thing that happens within our work, you know.
And there's something, you know, on a personal level for both of us. We, you know, in physical time and space come from very different cultures.
Yeah.
So we are always meeting with a sort of a, what's the word? I was going to say source. It's like a thread that comes through that neither of us can own as being part of our cultures, because it's just there and it's just alive.
Yeah.
And what's always been in common with us over the last 10 years of working together is that both of us have felt that common message coming through, which kind of exists beyond ideas of culture and locality in a way. It's like a deeper knowing, because I'm half Turkish and half English, and
I'm Scandinavian, different Scandinavian sources. But
Ali, did you want to? I thought
Um,
you.
no.
Okay, so I was just thinking from what you were saying, and from working with you as well, if she can ever is, you prepare yourselves very well to get into that space like you've just been talking about, and I think that's so important that you're ready and that you've put that love into the space. And I think before COVID, everyone was rushing around so much, going from one thing to the other, and the pandemic has kind of forced us to slow down, which I think is a good thing. But it's part of this cooperation, creating this safe space for people to exchange ideas, is that you ensure you have time to properly prepare yourself and that space to enable those kind of connections to happen. Lise, with your project, you had to move it kind of online and work in a different way. Do you want to?
Yeah, and I think, yeah, so, but when we moved it online, we wanted the people that we work with to be in a group so that they could also have like a shared note. We had one that was alone because she was moved from where she was in the beginning, but she was then part of the larger group. And then we quite soon had people here in our studio with big distance between us, so that we sort of had then people here and then online. And I think we also, you know, we prepared in the sense that we sent a box with all the materials that were needed, and we sent a lot of threads and took a lot of care into how that box would be received, so that there would be something, a treasure that they would open like a start, just as we would prepare the room here with everything, that it would be inviting. And we had like something to drink, or like fruit, or some kind of and this is also to create more, using it, yeah, to create an atmosphere of feeling welcome. And in our sense, we also moved, like we worked outside, so we used nature, but what we wanted also, or we talked with the group, was sort of to how do we share these stories to the viewers, like how do the exhibitors that comes to the exhibition, how can they take part of some. So like when we in the fall we were embroidering the leaves, we mended them as a way, and so part of our process was also protest into, we don't want to be treated like this, we want people to be seen, heard, and that way was a, so we had some kind of a protest into the work. I don't know if that was beside what you asked, but it was part of the space that we had, that this also came up as we want to be listened to. So how can we make more than our group listen?
I think that's great, because that kind of tunes into how you created a space. I assume that kind of idea of process came from the people you were working with, that was the message that they wanted to convey. So after creating that space, you've had that exchange of ideas, and that's what they wanted to kind of develop and share with the audiences that they knew were going to see the exhibition. And I assume, I know the project's continuing, and that do they, the participants, are they in touch outside of the project? Do they have other connections now?
I know that they are in Oslo, and they had a connection also to the group in Trondheim, and because Gelavesh has been she has a baby, so she's been on a baby leave, but we will resume after the summer, and then continue and probably include more and develop it. But we have just kept kept in touch with the group through that. No, I think they and then they meet, because the Human in Limbo, they meet every week, so we know that they all were meeting here in Oslo, and they have the same sort of resource in the other cities. So we knew that they were like outside us, they were and we are making a website out of this project, so that all the assignments will be there. And that's something that we want to give to the Human in Limbo, so that hopefully they can continue to use these as tools so it can reach more, because we really believe it's a very powerful way of feeling heard, seen, learning, sharing, like we have shared now.
Ali, that must be an important part of the people that you work with as well, that they come and learn new skills, but they feel seen and valued in the way you work with them.
I think yeah, it is very important. What's the question?
I suppose I'm just thinking about how these kind of projects can raise awareness of issues, but also help people feel connected. And the space that you create maybe is a space where the refugees that you work with might not have that otherwise, finding themselves in a new country and not have that kind of form of connection.
Yeah, I mean, in a city like London, I think access to a community garden, like a safe space, like a community garden where people can actually commune and meet and share, or like share their experiences, is very limited in London. Only if you know where the hidden community garden is, and if you know the community, then you can access that community. So I think it was very important to create this safe space to these groups, and I think it was very needed, especially during COVID, and it was helping a lot with breaking isolation. So not only the asylum seekers and refugees were benefiting from it, and I think we had so many volunteers take part of this project, because where we're meeting was always a very lovely space. It was always a safe space for all of them to be themselves and open up and be vulnerable, and then yeah, and from those situations, I mean, great things were always happening and emerging.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And at the same time, with Bees and Refugees existing, it kind of just helps with the fight against the kind of negative perceptions and things that there are in this country at the moment for asylum seekers and refugees. So it's great that you know that space is there and developing, and more people are becoming aware. So I think we've kind of talked a lot about the different people you work with, and I wonder if anyone has any thoughts about why it's important to create opportunities for people to come together that wouldn't otherwise meet. Anyone have any thoughts about that in your projects?
I guess one thing that comes is that it's actually, we are all participating, so it's not like there's a separation between us and other people who might come. Yeah. So in a way it's important, as a species that is collective, just like the bees, that we come together and remember that coming together is a teaching. And through that process, we might create confidence to come up with new ideas and new routes about being. I really love the bees as a symbol, and we've talked about this idea of an energetic bridges. So each of us are these energetic bridges to different places, to different times. And yeah, there's something really special about the unrestricted movement of the sky, and with the insects flying around different territories, and how in a way it is sad that humans have become restricted in their movements around the earth. And how can we remember actually that we are each have that nomadic spirit and work best when we remember that we are energetic bridges between lands and sky and all different parts of the ecosystem. Yeah, I guess that's what
I love what you said earlier about how nature is like it kind of unites us, where regardless of our background or where we come from, our sexuality or whatever, nature is what unites us, and all the restrictions and everything that divides us was always man-made. So it's unnatural, and it's only natural that we reject it and we kind of challenge it in order to hopefully eventually reaching a stage where we all feel free.
Yeah, it's very true. Beautifully put, Ali. I was thinking when you said about the sky and humans being restricted by borders, I think something that was important to us with the exhibition, and going back to something Lise said early on about things being the importance of using hands. And we were conscious, we wanted to kind of show how people's skills aren't stopped by borders, the man-made borders, and people bring their knowledge, and just how important it can be to be doing something with your hands to enable the kind of difficult conversations or things to exchange ideas and make change. I just wondered if anyone had anything about that, because obviously we're a craft organisation. We're very passionate about the power of making, to highlight social issues, to help people to make change, to give people agency to make change. And that was something we wanted to kind of try and highlight in the exhibition as well.
Yeah, and I also think like it's because it seems like it was always very serious. It was always also a lot of laughter, and suddenly so it creates so many different ways of communicating and bringing into, and also that feeling of equality of you know, what you brought in was what was needed. It wasn't like you needed to do this or that in order to feel like so many other places that we think that. So I think to meet, it's also becomes a big us, which is something that it's not about them as all the divisions that are set up, which this group really lives within and outside of, because of the way the system is set up. And it, yeah, so it's like was politics and fun and sadness and memory and loss, like everything in ability to open to all. And I feel that I'm really really grateful for have this way of working. I think it gives me personally a lot.
We did a project a few years ago, which we actually called Harvesting the Commons, and it was really around allowing the material to have its voice. And what we always find working with craft or materials is that it really disrupts or interrupts the idea of where knowledge comes from or who is carrying the knowledge. I don't know if you want to chat a little bit about that.
Yes, a little. It reminded me of that actually, Ali, when you were speaking earlier about all of these people having experience of beekeeping, and kind of because the opportunity is there, that is revealed in a way, and people you might not have known carried that knowledge. And yeah, in the garden space, we worked for a long time in the community garden space on the estate in London. We once, as part of this Harvesting the Commons, we just spread out on the earth raw sheep fleece, and then the garden was overlooked by all the residents in sort of around the garden, and we just left it there. We just left it covering the entire space, and little by little people came, and of course the people who had the knowledge to do what to do with this material came before others. But little by little, it became this, just this sort of ecosystem of village knowledge, and all of the Kurdish and Turkish people came and immediately started working with the material and they washed it and dried it and spun it, and you know, and then actually the children who'd only grown up in London and never been able to travel back to where the roots of the family were, you know, came from, they then had the opportunity to see their parents in that ancient connection with their source. And that just became so yeah, just again, just like a revelation, you know, because you again, you are sort of weaving down these threads to this common source of humanity and enabling to see a wider picture of something that has been a bit obscured in a way because of social conditions, you know. Yeah, so I think that is we love that the material unveils the world we then participate in for the life of the project.
And it has a language in that, which is also beautiful. So what is enabling is that people who don't, say, speak a common language in words, speak a common language in process.
Yeah.
And it's really powerful to reveal that. And it always disrupts everything. So you have young people who speak English and think that they were carrying the knowledge, suddenly realizing that they don't actually know this at all, and that actually they could learn something else from someone who's seemingly voiceless but has suddenly now got all the expression in their hands. And things like that around craft are just priceless because it does it every time.
And also just the visibility of process is something, because that is what's been deleted in a way from our realm more and more, that the process is not present in a way. It's just like, oh, there's finished, it's square, it's shiny, you can use it on your screen. And like, where is the process gone? And what does that enable us as humans to be with something that is a process rather than an outcome, that is not outcome based, you know? And I think at every making that we do is that there needs to be an exposure, a visibility, a deep engagement with the process of making. And the time that it takes, right? It's something, because from being in that time, you allow
more value.
Exactly. You allow that journey that it takes you on. And that also allows failure, whatever you want to call it. You know, it's not this idealized relationship to what it is you're creating and how efficiently you can do something, especially when it comes to a group, you know, because the biggest thing you need is time. You know, the most important thing you need is time, and we're kind of being limited on that resource more and more, and say, can you just do this in a couple of days? And it's like, well, not really, but yeah, so it's yeah.
And craft, again, you know, it has its own time, each piece, and it can't be sped up really. So there's these lace makers that are currently part of a project in Cornwall, and it's just extraordinary the time, connecting with the time of their lace making process. It just blows my mind, you know, that was once a common craft that people would spend a month or a year making one piece of fabric to place on their table. You know, it sort of changes a whole orientation.
Yeah, time's really key, isn't it, to the process, but also, like we were talking about, the build-up of trust and all of that. And I think people are getting more open to that in the wake after the pandemic, and understanding those kind of relationships and processes a bit more, and just allowing time. You know, everyone's kind of responded to how we were living so fast before, and hopefully, I don't know, I think we are returning to that a little bit, but hopefully we'll keep our awareness of it. So that's been really beautiful. It's brought up so many kind of thoughts and ideas for me. We've talked about sharing knowledge, pooling ideas, and creating spaces, safe spaces, most importantly, and how people can meet who otherwise wouldn't. All key things, I think, for creating commoning opportunities that are represented throughout all the projects in the exhibition. But I wondered if there's anything anyone feels, you know, you want to add, any key elements to creating this environment for social cooperation, whether it's creative, more entrepreneurial, although obviously the bees and honey making is a very creative process as well. But is there anything anyone kind of wants to bring up, or any comments that you'd like to make before we close the conversation?
Or perhaps I just wanted to mention a piece of information about time and how much time making something could take. So making a spoon of honey could take the bees 6 weeks of hard work day and night to make 1 spoon of honey. So that's goes to show like that we need to look at all these products in a different way.
Definitely. Thank you, Ali. Well, thank you so much, all of you, Lise, Ishik, Eva and Ali, for your thoughts and ideas and discussion, and of course time this morning. We really appreciate you taking part in this. And for anyone watching, if you'd like to comment or add to the discussion that we've been having to these conversations, please do. If you are on social media, use the hashtag #WeAreCommoners. And we'd have a network blog, our Crafting the Commons network, which you can see lots of blog posts where we've had lots of discussion with the exhibitors in the exhibition, but also the academics we were working with on the development of the exhibition. So that's on the Craftspace website, the Crafting the Commons blog. If you haven't seen the exhibition yet, it's on display at Hub in Sleaford till the 10th of July, and then it will be moving on to Hull and Colchester in September. But we also have a virtual tour, so do check that out as well. But thank you all again for your time. And
Thank you all.
say
It was
goodbye.
a pleasure being around you.
Thank you.
Really beautiful to meet you.